Guys, it's me, Barlos, back here again with a new video. For today's video, we're actually gonna do things a little bit different. I'm not gonna do a usual review or countdown or whatever the fuck it is that I do, but for this video, I wanted to just explain to you, or more like pitch. Pretend this is a pitch me. I'm trying to sell you this pen. I'm trying to sell you is this idea that I've been working on for a while. And if you guys know me, all my closest friends and fans know, I have like I guess a hobby or maybe a passion, I don't know, but I like to come up with stories. I like to come up with characters, I like to come up with plots and themes and storylines. I have like entire like journals, or I used to have journals, but then now it's on Google Docs, but where I just write these stories down, usually for like movies or shows or comics or whatever. And I don't really like talk about them or share them that much, mostly because there's going to be a conversation where I just naturally come in and like, oh, you want to hear about my OCs, my original characters? Which, by the way, this isn't really an OC. I wouldn't call this an OC. I feel like OCs are something that people, original characters, and then people come up with, like artists, just for fun. Like, oh, let me draw my OC in this outfit. Let me draw them on the beach and shit. I don't really do that. Like, these characters I didn't create for no reason. I created them for a story, like the way I see OC is you made the character first and then the story later. I come up with the story first and the characters later. So I don't really see it that way. These aren't characters I just made for fun. I made this to tell something, to, tell a story. So, yeah, but like I said, it's also just kind of embarrassing to talk about. Like, no one wants to hear some dudes like fantasy or some shit they made up that are never even gonna happen anyway, right? So, yeah, I know, again, I'm sure some of you guys probably heard me talk about a little bit here and there, but not into detail. And I almost just keep it to myself. Again, it's more like a hobby. Whenever I got free time, I write something down, characters or some like idea that I have that I don't know, because it's fun. But now that I have this YouTube channel, where I can literally just yap about whatever I want, well, this is a perfect opportunity for me to share this. So, especially now, you don't have to listen, because you just turn off the video and then pretend that you did watch it. And so when I text you, like, hey, did you guys watch this video? You just be like, yeah, I like this little part in this, well, that's fine though. The views, I'm also making these for myself, honestly, but it's fine. I don't care. But yeah, like I said, for this video, I'm gonna pitch to you guys this one idea, storyline that I came up with, which I have been working on or thinking of for a while now. I'm gonna say at least a couple of years, since high school. And yeah, so let's just get right into this. Okay, so this one idea I came up with, can you see that? Yeah. It's called New Order. And I hope you guys can see this right. I feel like I positioned it correctly. I don't know. But I can't be bothered to like redo or anything. But yeah, this one is called New Order. This is a working title, which is why it's in parentheses. Every name and like concept here is a working title, so it could change in the future if I just come up with something better, or for whatever reason. But for the time being, that's what it's called. It's called New Order. So before we actually go into like storylines or anything, we need to set up the tone, right? Like, what is this? Is it a comedy? Is it drama? Well, this is most definitely a drama. I make comedies. I don't think I'm that particularly funny. I'm just very sarcastic, but yeah, this is a drama, very serious. The tone, or I guess the specific genre that I want this to be, is grimdark, which I think is the perfect word for my series, this series back here, is grimdark. And if you guys don't know grimdark, it's just like it's a type of story where everyone is miserable. Like, this is it takes place in like a world or anything really where it's just a terrible place to be. Like, you do not want to live here. There's just so much happening. A good example of a grimdark story is Game of Thrones, which if you've watched Game of Thrones, there's dragons flying around, breathing fire, destroying everything. We have like snow zombies walking around, transforming people. We have like a disease, a virus in there that turns your skin to like stone. And there's motherfuckers fighting for every fucking reason, killing each other. It's a grimdark story, right? No one wants to live in the Game of Thrones world, right? Because unless you're like the 1% in the Game of Thrones society, like the noble royals, your life is gonna suck. And this is exactly how I want to be. Life here sucks for everyone who isn't in the 1%, or anyone who isn't mentioned here, really. So I think that's a perfect example. I know the word grimdark is like originated from Warhammer, which if you played Warhammer, then I played Warhammer, but if you play Warhammer, then you definitely know more about grimdark. But yeah, like, I'm not saying I'm a miserable person, but I definitely have a very nihilistic view of the world, and it definitely reflects that nihilistic view. So yeah, this series I do want it to be like a long form content. So I'm thinking like a TV show or a comic book, something where like the storyline just kind of goes really long. Because I don't feel like a movie. There's too many concepts and stuff I came up with for a movie, or even like a video game. And I'm mostly inspired by that of like Robert Kirkman, who's the creator of The Walking Dead. He has some like great advice about how because The Walking Dead comic is like really long, right? The show is really long, but the comic specifically is like 200 issues and it ran for like 15 years. And what Robert Kirkman said in an interview was that like he already had going into the series, he already had the beginning and the end planned out. That was a solid. He knew how it started. He knew it was gonna end. The actual middle of the story, he kind of just came up with it as soon as he worked on it. So which isn't really a bad idea. I mean, Breaking Bad, another great show, also had that. The creator of Breaking Bad, Vince Gilligan, he already had the beginning and the end mapped out. It's just the actual middle part which you work out once you actually start working on it. And it's exactly how this is. I already have the beginning and the end in my mind, but the actual storyline in the middle, that's in case of actually like work on it. Which maybe in the future video I'll actually make more videos about specific storylines. But here I'm just doing like a general overview of how the lore and the rules and the major characters, which you'll see in the back, and I'll explain to in a bit. So yeah, I'm definitely thinking long form because I want this to kind of be like I have a lot, so. I may be a movie guy. I feel like a lot of my ideas mostly work better in long form content. And so, I mean, I'm also a comic nerd, so that'll definitely be it. But yeah, so New Order, Grimdark. Now for the actual lore. So New Order takes place in not really our world, which is kind of a confusing statement, but Breaking Bad takes place in our world, right? Our history and our society exists in Breaking Bad. Game of Thrones does not take place in our world. That was completely, its own thing. This one kind of takes place in our world. Our history is still this history, but with some major key differences. And one of those major differences is the fact that, God, as in the creator of the universe, as well as multiple gods of other smaller things, exist 100%, and everyone knows them. So, God, in the world of the New Order, the question whether or not God is real that's not even a question. God is real. God as in the creator of the universe, no life, is real. And there's also many gods, in fact. Gods of very specific things, which we'll get into. And so I want to build this world in which that is the concept. But only that, but the world in the New Order is controlled by various secret, well, not really secret society, but various societies and organizations that act beyond law and order. So the word New Order itself refers to an organization that I created that exists in here called the New Order. Again, not working title. I know there's a lot of Nazi connotations with the word New World Order, but that's why I removed the world part, just New Order. Okay, I don't want that any fucking Nazi connotations with it. But yeah, the New Order is an organization that was created around the 1800s. I want to say far back, and this whole purpose is to document and capture and document, investigate, and just research anything that's paranormal, mythological, or just not part of the natural sense of the world. That's their whole thing. The best way I can describe it is kind of like the SCP Foundation. That one creepypasta, or maybe it's creepypasta, but that shared stories of that secret organization that collects monsters and other various things and not spies on them, but works on them, researches them. That's kind of how the New Order also functions. They gotta do the same thing. The New Order kind of works like a government. It has its own army, its own citizenship, its own money. It's a bodiless government, I guess, the best way I can say. They don't actually have a territory they control. They have areas throughout other countries, which I call no zones. No as in New Order acronym is NO, so no. And so a no zone is an area in a country, say in the US, right? There's a no zone in Texas. That no zone is directly under the authority of the New Order. So the US government, their law, the Constitution, American citizens cannot enter the no zone. It's basically its own mini country in there. Only citizens of the New Order, as in their personnel, scientists, doctors, soldiers, or high-ranking members can actually enter there, and they have complete and full control over that land. Their laws apply to that. So, and this is in the US, it's in multiple countries, and it's all very not even cities, just areas with one single research facility. And so they're called no zones, which I really like that name. And so that's kind of how they function. And the New Order has a very strict hierarchy of members, and things, kind of like the United Nations, which is another major faction in this. The UN, exists as the overworld governing body, and then a big source of conflict within the story is between the New Order and the United Nations over the ethics of the New Order. The UN doesn't like the fact the New Order kind of denies experimenting on people and inhumane research, which they 100% do. Again, grimdark, they do that. Our protagonist, like the world is viewed through the New Order, right? This is our bird eye view, right? All of our major characters work or are part of the New Order. That is our protagonist, not our hero. The main character isn't our hero, but our protagonist that we follow through, right? And yeah, the United Nations doesn't like the New Order, the way they experiment on people, and the New Order constantly interferes in politics and other governments. They make sure politicians that are friendly to them get elected into other countries, which also puts them in conflict with the United Nations, who wants to be democratic and free as possible, which the New Order doesn't, because they want their things. So that's a big source of conflict. But besides the New Order, like I said, back to the mythology, that's the first part I want to get into. There exists the creator god, right? The central figure, the creator of life and the universe. His name is Rust. Maybe asking yourself, what does Rust mean, Carlos? Why did you pick that name for God? I don't know. The word, when I was thinking of this, I tried really hard to think of a name for God. I wanted to call him just God, or maybe like Yahweh, some other variation of that. But it just sounded too lame. I know I say he's God, but I really want to remove the concept of God as in Christianity. This isn't really that sense. This is more like a Zeus or an Odin type thing, So I called it Rust. The word Rust kind of just came to me, and no joke, this might sound super corny, but it came to me in a dream. I just remember I don't remember the specifics, it was a long time ago. I just remember the word Rust, because I was thinking about this before I went to bed. I remember the word Rust, and I just felt like, okay, divine intervention. His name is Rust now. I'm sure I could come up with some other better name or deeper meaning for this, but for the time being, that's it. So Rust is, the creator of the universe. He's the creator of life, right? No one created Rust. Rust wasn't born. Rust always existed. Before there was life, before there was universe, before there was time and space, there was Rust. He always existed, and Rust will always exist. He's immortal. He was never born and he will never die. Rust is the beginning and the end. He is the Alpha and the Omega, okay? So, Rust is God, but he isn't exactly a merciful God. Rust created life, but for no specific reason, right? There's always the concept of why did God create life, right? What is the point of existence? What is the meaning of it all? In the world of New Order, there is no meaning. Rust created life just because he could. There was no great plan or scheme. There was no purpose. Rust just could, and he did. So that's what it is. Life itself is an experiment, Ironically, no, the New Order commits experiments to figure out, the answers to life and everything, but there is no answer. So it's kind of this never-ending quest. The New Order wants to find meaning in life when there is no meaning, and they know that, but what can they do? Just stop. They have to keep going. Maybe they'll find meaning, they'll make meaning. But yeah, like I said, Rust isn't very merciful. Rust can literally just snap his fingers and he can create anything out of thin air, right? That's how he created life. He just snapped his fingers and stuff happened. Reality is whatever Rust wants it to be. He is the artist, right? And everything else, reality and time and space, is the canvas. Anything he wants is done, right? Rust exists in a plane beyond our understanding. How do you comprehend a being where the laws of time and death just don't apply? Again, Rust existed way before anything. Rust is life. He is existence. He is reality. He can't die. He can't, he'll always be there. So, yeah, like I said, Rust revealed himself to the world. So people know his existence. And another major faction in the New Order is the Rustarian Church, Rustarian Church, which is this organized religion, the only really real religion in the New Order. Like I said, it doesn't really take place in our world, as in major religions like Christianity or Islam don't exist in this. Instead, it's all centralized into a single religion that worships Rust, which we'll get that into a separate video. It's not nearly as important right now, but yeah. So, Rust, I want to say that Rust doesn't really like being worshipped either. He doesn't, God, again, our understanding of God is he sees humanity as his children, right? Rust doesn't see it that way. Rust sees us, humanity, as guinea pigs. Animals just kind of doing their own thing where he just watches. So while Rust can, if there's ever an earthquake or a volcano erupts, Rust can easily just snap his fingers and save people, but he chooses not to, mostly because there's a detachment to him in, humanity. He doesn't see humans as living beings. He just sees them as something that ants. Ants in the same thing. Like if you see an anthill with water, you're not gonna stop and save them. You're just they're insignificant to his eyes. Russ doesn't see us as important beings. And that's also another thing I want to establish is there's a cycle of life and death. Life is always going. Like there is a cycle where Russ creates life, and then life ends up destroying itself, erasing all of it, and so Russ just starts again. So the beginning of this story, that cycle has been happening for millennia. Russ has gone completely detached from it. He knows humanity will eventually destroy itself, and he figures why bother, intervene. That also goes against free will, right? Russ gave free will to humanity. He doesn't want to interfere. That's a big thing about Russ. He can easily end all diseases, all wars, but he just chooses not to. Mostly because it goes against his philosophy, free will. If he was to come in and stop everything, then what will stop us from just being mindless slaves, Sims that he can just tell to do things. And B, he just doesn't care. He doesn't care. He knows people die. Russ is also the god of death. He controls life. So for him, it don't matter. Another lore bit, there is no afterlife in the New Order. So it's kind of like the atheist thing. When a person dies, your spirit, there's a moment where you can become like a ghost, a spirit, kind of just exists in between planes of existence. But after that period, you get absorbed into Russ. He takes the life back. And you just kind of join this collective mindset where you kind of just exist. It's kind of hard to explain it because I have so many esoteric views, but you don't really, there's no heaven or hell in the world of the New Order. You kind of just go into a shared mindset with other people. You kind of, there is kind of life after death, but not in the sense of like I said, heaven or hell. It's just more of a beyond where you're really only conscious, but you're not really physically there. Again, hard to explain. I have a lot of these, and it's really hard to put into words. It makes sense to me. I'm probably not doing a good job explaining it, but I don't know. I hope you can somewhat understand. But yeah, like I said, Rust, not a very good god. He's a bad guy or anything. He doesn't like seeing people die or anything. But for him, it's just all meaningless. But yeah, as for Rust's appearance, he's just a normal guy. There's nothing. He looks like the dude you see at Walmart just walking around. In fact, I kind of want to look if I were to give a general description, which by the way, I'm not gonna get into race or height or weight or anything. That's too specific. I feel like these characters, their personalities are more important than that. As for I'll give some general physical descriptions, maybe what they wear or stuff like that, or is anything unique about them. But as for what they actually look like and all the details, I'll just leave it up to you guys. Anything you guys can come up with your mind is better than I can describe, right? I was gonna pay a Twitter artist to maybe do the major ones, but those motherfuckers charge way too much and they take way too long. I think one dude was charging $50 and 6 months for it to deliver. I'm not, and I have a lot, so I'm not fucking doing that. I was also thinking of doing AI generated images, but AI art is fucking ugly as shit, and I do not support AI, so I won't do that either. So I'm just leaving it up to you guys' imagination, okay? But yeah, so Russ is just a dude. In my head, I envision him wearing socks and sandals and cargo shorts and Hawaiian shirts, and he kind of just walks around. I want to say he mostly lives in resorts around the world. And he likes visiting countries, but not really interacting with people. One thing Russ about personality is that he likes telling people that he is Russ, but no one believes him because why would they? And yeah, he kind of Russ is also sentient throughout time. He knows what's gonna happen, right? Obviously. So when people come to talk to him, he already knows what they're gonna say. He already knows how they're just gonna respond and their response to that. So for him, he doesn't like talking to people that much because to him, these conversations already happen as they're happening, and they will happen. He's gonna have it again in a different time. It's like I said, it's very confusing, but he exists just beyond our understanding of what existence is. So Russ is a big character. He's very ambivalent, I guess is the word. He's always omnipresent, but he never actually interacts directly into the story. But he's always in the back, his presence plays a big role, even though he's not actually there, right? So that's Russ. Like I said, now you might be seeing the circle around with these other characters, which I hope you do see. So Russ definitely has his children. They're known as the Divines. And I say children, but Russ didn't get a woman pregnant. Which, by the way, gender for the gods, I know gender is kind of pointless for gods, but generally speaking, Russ is definitely more male. He's a dude. I could say Russ definitely could change gender at will, and I think a lot of times in my storylines he does be a girl just for no reason. But generally speaking, I imagine mostly him as a male, just because most people imagine God as a man, so that's what I'm saying. But anyway, as far as 8 children, and like I said, Russ didn't get a woman pregnant. No, like these are his children, as in the sense they were like the first beings he created, and he just called them his kids, right? I mean, what else would he call them? And while all these divines are siblings, they don't really see each other as siblings because they were all created in the same time, right? Like Russ didn't create them as babies and then raise them as kids, all of them growing up together in a house. No, Russ created them in different time periods. So like, for instance, the oldest one was born 1,000 years from the youngest one. And so, because even though they call each other, like all these other divines call each other siblings and brother and sister, they don't really see each other as brother and sister. Like they're related, related as in the sense they have the same dad, but they didn't grow up together. They don't really know each other. They rarely see each other. They're always doing stuff, living in other parts of the world. So they're siblings in the sense that, they have a dad, but they don't really have to share DNA or, there's it's kind of like if your parent got divorced and they married another one, and then your new stepdad or stepmom had their own kid. Like, yeah, legally, technically, that is your sibling, your step sibling. But obviously, there's gonna be a disconnect. So you don't really know them, and like especially if you're like already older, like a teenager or something, it's not really like you're not gonna really see them as a sibling. They are your sibling, but there's gonna be a disconnect there because you don't really know them. And you didn't grow up with them. And you don't really share DNA. Like, none of these are really related by blood, Like, it's hard to be when you don't actually have real parents. Like, Russ is their dad, but they didn't come up with sperm or anything, so. Yeah, none of the divines have moms. They all have a dad, who technically could also be their mom, so there's that. But anyway, there's 8 of them. As you probably see their names already. I was thinking of actually giving them, like, actual names, but I feel like their name will just be what they're because the divine, they're a god of something, and I decided to just put their name as in the thing they're the god of, because I feel like it makes them like more stick out more, and it just makes sense, right? Like before the concept of that thing, it was them, so that that thing was named after them, So like the first one is War. War is the oldest, and War is the god of war. All of these they're named after the primary thing they're god of, but they're all gods of 2 things. So War is the god of war, but he's also the god of chaos, right? So War is the oldest. I envision him, like I say, he's the god of war, right? He's all about battle, victory, blood, fighting. That's his thing. I envision him to be like fucking 7 feet tall, and he's like pure hunking muscle. And he is like filled with scars all over him. Which, by the way, none of the divines can die. It's like they can't. They were given these special. Being the firstborn or first created beings makes them immortal. They can't die. Like you can like chop their heads off, but like they can just reattach it. Like they can't die. Okay, they're literally untouchable and they're very powerful. So War still has battle scars all over him. I'll envision him to wear like those ancient like warrior armor. He has like the skin of a dead lion over his shoulder. He's the macho man. He's what every like alpha male on like Twitter envisions themselves as. That's him. War. As such his personality, War is an asshole. Being War, he likes fighting. He constantly just starts wars just because he can, because he wants to. He's constantly fighting with his other siblings because, being the oldest, he's kind of like a bully. And so he constantly just, not technically the most powerful, but definitely the most physically antagonizing out of all of them. And so he just bullies them. None of the siblings like him. In fact, a lot of the drama and plot lines around this revolve around just the fact that War just sucks. And they can't really do anything because, again, divines can't die, so not like they can kill them. And so that's a big plot of that. So like I said, War is just big and mean. That's his whole personality trait. He's definitely the most, out of all the divines, he's the one with the least amount of humanity within him. Again, being the god of war and being the god of chaos, he loves death and destruction, He just destroys. Rust may be the creator, but War is the destroyer, And that's his whole thing. He's destruction incarnate. And so it's hard to, how do you think a person whose pure existence is conflict is like? He's going to be rough, he's going to be mean, and that's what War is. Mean. So, that's how I would describe him. The next sibling, which by the way, War is the oldest, but like, in terms of actual next, like, ages, I don't really have any. There all could be whatever, place them whatever time. I'm just going to go through these 4 on this side, because these are the brothers, these are the male siblings, right? So first we have War. Next is Weather. Weather is the god of the weather, which, what that means, he's like the god of lightning, he's the god of rain, he's the god of snow, he's the god of the wind. He's basically like the god of the elements, but it's more like weather related, I was thinking of just making him god of lightning and calling him like lightning or thunder, but I decided to kind of just all fit that in one category since it was all wind and rain gods are also like a popular thing in mythology. Which by the way, like these are just I picked them at random. These are all based on around like existing gods in various mythology, right? Like every mythology has a god of war, every mythology has a god of rain, Weather is also the god of fire, just to add more into the element things, every mythology has a god of fire. So weather is the god of the weather, which is lightning, rain, snow, a wind, and he's the god of fire. So he's elemental, right? Weather, as for his physical description, I want Weather to be like a really skinny, lanky guy, he looks homeless. Is what I'm trying to say. He has like a beard. He's unkempt. Weather's like a nomad. He likes traveling. Also, he goes with the wind, right? And he like I said, he's lanky. He's like not really attractive. I want to say he's definitely unconventionally attractive. Not necessarily ugly, but like he's not pulling any girls. Which by the way, all the divines do. Well, actually, I'll get that to later. That's probably a thing. I'll say that. Let's put a pin on that. But yeah, Weather. He dresses like a nomad, like a drifter, He's constantly moving. He never in one location. Weather actually likes helping people, even in the smallest ways. And he doesn't admit it. Weather is kind of the dude who doesn't admit that he likes helping people, but he really does. By the way, all the divines have like followers called acolytes, and they're like people who dedicate themselves specifically to this guy. So War has his acolytes. Weather doesn't really have acolytes, as fire and trolling the weather isn't really something people I feel like worship that much. And he doesn't, not only that, Weather doesn't want acolytes. He's like a lone wolf. He likes being alone. He likes walking around and doing his own thing, He is still a good person. In fact, Weather actually works with the New Order. Whenever the New Order have like a threat or like some being that's too powerful for them to control or battle, Weather usually comes out to help them because, he's just that great of a guy. And yeah. Just for personality, I mean, I kind of went into it also, but Weather, he's like, out of all the divines, he's probably arguably the main character, quote unquote, because we mostly see through his perspective. Weather is the most humane out of the divines. He definitely cares about humanity the most, and so a lot of the storylines involving the family, which is mostly just family drama. He's usually like the audience is protagonist. We see it through his view and his understanding. Which, yeah, like I say, he controls the weather. He's kind of like, Aang from the Last Airbender, who controls the elements. Not all of them, which we'll get into, but yeah. He's arguably the main character, and that's Weather. So the next one is Ocean. He is the god of water, which I was going to call him Water, but I felt it's kind of stupid. I mean, Weather is kind of a dumb name. I was going to call him Fire, but that's stupid. I feel like Ocean is better. God of the ocean, god of the sea. So that's what I'm going to call him. So Ocean is the god of water. He's also the god of healing, right? Since, water is the source of all life, right? Water heals. So that's what he's also, like I said, he's the god of water. He controls the seas, he controls the ocean. He's like water bending, like airbender, he can like control that. Kind of like Aquaman, he can talk to fish. But yeah, as far as physical description, Ocean is like a hippie. He a surfer hippie to be exactly, like surfs up, brah. He wears like sandals. He wears like a button shirt that he's never buttoned up, so he's always showing off his like pecs. He also constantly wears like swimming shorts. He has long hair. He's like a surfer. He's a surfer bro, surfer hippie. He lives in the beach always. I don't want to say being the god of water, he doesn't actually live in the ocean. I feel like that's too cliche. I was thinking giving him like fish features, like maybe gills, but I feel like being devices looking like people fits a lot better because it makes them more unsuspecting. But yeah, Ocean, I almost called him Water. Ocean is like average build, average height. He looks average. He is like a hippie, so he lives in the beaches. He's very like environmental. He doesn't really involve himself with the family that much, mostly because he's very uninterested in all that. So he's definitely the least involved out of all the siblings. One thing is that when Russ was creating the Divines, being his first creations, it wasn't perfect, and some of them had some abnormalities, War was the fact that he was way too tall, 7 feet. Actually, he might be 8 feet, honestly. I just want him to be like really tall. Weather is very lanky. He's very skinny. He's like a twig. Ocean has like a left arm missing. He doesn't have a left arm. His left arm is made out of water. So it's just like a water running down and connected to his body, and he just forms into a hand and he uses it like that. So he's missing an arm, he has a water arm, so that's what he does. But yeah, physical that's basically Ocean. He's very, again, I don't want him to be cliche. He doesn't live in the ocean. He lives like in beaches or near body of water. He isn't fish like. He's just a person. He doesn't need contact with water to survive, but he's definitely very chilled out. You know, he doesn't want to be lost with his family. He just wants to be in the beach, sing songs, you know, talk to all the surfer babes. That's Ocean, a very cool guy. So the next one is Light. Light is the god of light. You know, like light. Like this, you know, god of light mostly means like a hero god, someone who's kind of like Hercules, someone who's supposed to like, you know, be the hero, be the good, god of the good. You know, god of light just makes more sense. He's also the god of the sun, which, you know, light, obviously. Light, however, I want him to be like physical description. He is supposed to be the most conventionally attractive dude out there, like the most beautiful man alive is Light. Okay, he is the perfect embodiment of male beauty standards, you know? So, I don't know who exactly that is, but that's how I want it to be. Just picture the most handsome man you can think of, that's Light. Okay? And just like Ocean, Light is also imperfect. His right arm is missing, so his right arm is made up of light. Pure energy light makes up his arm, so that's that. Yeah, Light being a hero god is kind of like, he's definitely the most popular, as he's kind of seen like a slave. All the divines are kind of celebrities, you know, they have their own acolytes. Ocean has an acolytes, by the way, they all live with him. Light also has acolytes. People want to be heroes. Light is kind of full of himself. He knows he's like the hero god, so he kind of like acts very, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Not obnoxious, but he's very full of himself. You know, he thinks really highly. He's not necessarily like an asshole. You know, he's not mean. He's just very full of himself. You know, I guess that's the best way I can describe it. Yeah, Light and Weather definitely see eye to eye. They're like really close to one another, and they also want to help out people. Although Light isn't nearly as involved. He doesn't like the New Order. He kind of sees it as, you know, too controlling, which Light is all about like freedom. You know, he's all about people expressing themselves. But, you know, regardless about that anyway. But yeah, Light, the most attractive man you can think of. Energy arm. He controls the sun, so he can make it day whenever he wants. In fact, his little like section that he lives in with his acolyte, it's always day. It's never night. The sun is always up. Not the rest of the world. Like, again, it's like magic, so, you know, why is the rest of the world night when this one area the sun never goes away? But like, don't think about it. It's magic. You know, gods. So yeah, Light. He's very involved, and him and Weather are best friends. So now that was all the dudes. Now let's go into the girls. There's, well, 3 of these are girls. We'll get to the last one last. But the 3 sisters is, the first one is Wisdom. Wisdom is goddess of wisdom, you know, goddess of knowledge, smart goddess. She's also goddess of the arts, you know, she's the goddess of music, she's the goddess of, you know, art like painting, she's the goddess of storytelling, like that's her whole thing, you know. Wisdom is obviously the smartest being alive, maybe except Rust. She's very, like, she dresses for her physical appearance like a businesswoman, you know. She wears glasses, her hair is like straightened out. She wears, you know, like a business. She's a, you know, a girl boss, right? She's always very elegant, you know. She's very high society. She's very, you know, she's definitely like very robotic. Also, she like hates pretending, letting her emotions. She's very emotionless, you know. She's all about facts and logic. So that dictates her whole personality. You know, her acolytes are just people who want to be smart. They want to just read and learn stuff. Wisdom is all obsessed with trying to learn everything. Even though she knows everything, there's always stuff to learn. And she doesn't really have like powers in the same as the other ones. You know, like Ocean controls the water, Weather the elements, Light controls the light, energy blast. Wisdom doesn't really have powers in that sense. She's just really smart. You know, Wisdom is actually Rust's favorite child, and he like cherishes her. He's the one. Wisdom is the child that Rust talks to the most and hangs out with the most, and he likes her because, you know, she knows everything. One thing is that she also can tell like the truth. So every time some drama breaks out to the siblings, Wisdom is usually the one they go to first because she has the ability to tell the truth. Not really because that's her power, more because she's so smart. She can just figure out when someone's lying based on their facial expressions or mood or tone of voice and stuff like that. But yeah, besides that, Wisdom, like I said, very emotionless. She doesn't really express her feelings. She like suppresses them a lot because she cares more about like logic and things, right? But regardless, she does have emotions, and they do show up every now and then, you know. What Wisdom, Light, and Weather kind of make up a trio of like people who actually want to help humanity, and they oppose their siblings constantly, you know, like wars, destruction, or Ocean not paying attention, accidentally causing a tsunami. Like they care about humanity and they try their best to like make lives easy for people, even though they don't really succeed a lot. You know, it's hard to do that when you're a god. But like I said, that's the trio. In terms of the divines, weather, wisdom, and light make up like our main protagonist. Weather is still like the main character, quote unquote, but like the other two still play a big part in it. You know. So the next sibling is love. Love, goddess of love. Easy, easy. She's also the goddess of wine, which surprisingly is something that a lot of mythologies have, a god of wine, or goddess of wine in this case. Also, for wisdom, not really. Wisdom, I want to show, I guess not really like a physical abnormality, like light and ocean or the other ones, but whereas war is super tall, wisdom, I want to be her to be like really short. She's like tiny, you know, like barely 5 feet, you know, Sabrina Carpenter type. And she like I want to say that she almost gets confused like a child whenever she actually interacts with people. So it's like really short. So that's her thing. And also kind of like a small thing, but I actually want her to have like 2 different eye colors. I know there's like a word for it, like a condition, but one eye is brown, the other one's blue. It's just one thing I kind of want to do because I think it's like a cool character trait, you know. But yeah, wisdom, smart. Love is the goddess of love. She, you know, physical description, she is the most conventionally attractive woman out there, right? She is the light is the epitome of male beauty standards. Love is the epitome of female beauty standards. She's beautiful, most beautiful person in existence. She has a lot of acolytes. War actually want to show has the most acolytes, but love comes as a close second. You know, again, she's very hedonistic. You know, all she cares about is love. Not necessarily sex, but as in, you know, people loving each other and caring. She dresses, whereas, you know, wisdom dresses very modestly, right? She's always dressed like she's in an important meeting. You know, she shows as little skin as possible. Love shows as much skin as possible. You know, not for lack of a better word, she dresses very slutty, which, you know, not necessarily a bad thing. That's her style. She shows as much skin as possible, like I said. And she's very like flirtatious, even with her siblings, which, you know, kind of weird, but again, they don't really see each other as siblings. She's very flirtatious. An abnormality, which I guess may not be so beautiful, but one thing she has is I actually want love to have like 4 arms. She has 4 arms, 2, and then another 2, you know, down here. So she just has 4 arms. Russ just gave her 4 arms for no reason. Kind of fucked up there, but yeah. Besides that, you know, nothing much to say. Beautiful. She does involve the siblings a lot. She's more passive like Ocean, but you know, she likes to be involved, even though a lot of times she couldn't really care. So that's her thing. But yeah, that's love. The next sister is Night, the opposite of light. Night is the goddess of night, of the night. She's also the goddess of the moon, which you think would be kind of the same thing, but I decided to keep it separate. You know, Night, as for the physical description, I want her to kind of just look like a stereotypical punk. You know, like she wears leather and chains. You know, she has like the mohawk thing where like the sides are completely shaven, but she has like a really big mohawk. She's very rebellious. You know, I honestly think that Night is the youngest, so she's very rebellious. You know, she doesn't like her duty as like, you know, goddess of the night or whatever. So she's always constantly going off and just doing shit. And again, a lot of plot. Well, most of the plots to do with war. Night is definitely the second troublemaker. She just doesn't like Russ. She hates her like position as like a divinely being. She wants to be human basically, but she can't. She can't just give up her divinehood, you know. So what can she do? But yeah, she has her own acolytes who kind of just follow her around. She definitely has like the smallest of the bunch though, because she doesn't really like having acolytes either, but she kind of just keeps them around as servants. And yeah, one abnormality I guess not really that Night has is that one Night is actually deaf. She can't hear. Russ didn't give her hearing, and once he did figure out how to give people hearing, he just didn't give her any. I guess he liked that the way she is. So she communicates with sign language, which all the divines know. And, you know, being deaf, she's also mute. So, you know, that's her thing. But besides that, you know, being the goddess of night, she's also the goddess of like darkness and stuff like that. Not necessarily like her second position, but she has like her power. Love doesn't really have powers, I guess, either. But like, I guess her power is that even with the siblings fighting, like her sense of like love is so powerful that the siblings stop fighting because they just feel good. Like love just makes them happy, just, you know, a positive. So she's very positive. Night she controls darkness, you know, she controls the moon. She can send people to like the shadow realm and shit like that, right? Like she controls shadows and darkness. She can make things dark. She can, in her little section, where she does her own little area, it's always night. It's never morning. So it's in pitch black darkness. So that's her thing, you know. And yeah, like I said, very rebellious, kind of edgy, being darkness and all that. But yeah, that's the sisters. Now the mass divine is nature. Nature is gender is ambiguous. I don't want nature to be a boy or a girl. Kind of like an in between, you know. Like their pronouns will be they them. Okay. They have. I want nature to have a very like not gender neutral. There's like a word for it, but like I guess gender neutral appearance. Like it's both feminine and masculine. And nature doesn't identify as either one of them, so they are kind of like a mix, you know. Like I guess it's kind of hard to give a physical description for that, like their dress and stuff like that. But it's very gender neutral, you know, like masculine but feminine at the same time. But nature, because of the name, is the and I know it says there's God and goddess, and they are gender neutral. But I'll just use the word God just to simplify things. I feel like the word God itself is kind of gender neutral. So nature is the god of nature. You know, they are the god of trees. They are the god of the earth, the god of animals. You know, that's their whole thing. So you know, they are also the god of the hearth, which is you know a god of the hearth is kind of like a protector god. You know, someone who protects people, their homes, which nature does a not a good job at. You know, that's a big sense of that. Nature kind of like ocean just kind of want to keep to themselves, living in the woods, which is their area, and their acolytes. But they often get themselves involved mostly because they have to more than they want to, because you know, being the god of the hearth, they kind of just do that. So it's more, you know, they kind of just forced into it. But yeah, that's nature. Like I said, all the divines are related to one another in the sense that the rest of their dead. They all have powers and domain over these. They have acolytes worship them except for weather. And their whole storylines just revolve around them bickering against one another and how that has like very bad consequences for people, you know. Like war will get into an argument with say nature, right? So war will send his acolytes to kill nature's acolytes and just destroy the land, and nature will retaliate by causing like a fucking, you know, grass to grow and just destroy places that war likes to visit. It's a lot of that. And so weather, light, and wisdom constantly have to like stop them from fighting. There is like major serious storylines. I know that sounds mostly just like small filler, but yeah, a lot of their storylines involve them bickering and how you know the consequences of getting in the middle of the wrath between gods never leads to good things, you know. So that's their whole storylines. Now, one thing I did want to establish is obviously they have acolytes, but divines also have children. They have their own kids who they have relations with, you know, mortal people. So it's not like Rust. They didn't create, you know, none of the divines can create people, as in like, you know, snap their fingers and create life like Rust. They actually have to get intimate, which divines do get intimate, you know. And the children of divines in the world of the New Order are called divinads, you know, as in, you know, descendant of a divine, divinad. And in the society of the New Order, not the organization, but just the world in general, divinads are considered, like they're held in high regard, right? Like, the church, the Rustarian church obviously worships Rust, and any divinad is the grandchild of Rust, so they held in high position. Same thing, you know, the acolytes also kind of worship the children of the divines as, you know, godlike. Even though divinads don't have any powers, they don't inherit their like parents' special abilities in that area that they are the god of, but they're still, you know, held in high regard. Now the divines have lots of the divines have lots of children. However, divines only have one prime child, which is a kid that they actually like hang out with and talk to and, you know, keep around. All the other children are just kind of just dumped off. They don't really care about them, you know. It's kind of hard to when, you know, for a divine who's immortal and live for thousands of years, humanity's lifespan of only like 100 is very short, you know, so they don't get time to know their kids. A prime child, however, they do know, because that's the one kid that they decide to actually raise. They have the potential of maybe, you know, inheriting their abilities or something like that. So, and a prime child varies in how long they actually are the prime child. Sometimes when they reach like 40 and they get dumped and a new one comes in. Other times it's for life, but it depends on the divine, you know. So if you see all of these like arrows pointing down, that's because these characters, which we'll get into later, are divinads. They are children of the divines. So they hold in high power. The New Order, specifically the organization, monitors the divinads. You see them as like, you know, many divinads end up working with the New Order once they get like, you know, the ones who are either just washed up or even the prime children. So the New Order is filled with that, and they have like a strict hierarchy, which the New Order, like top of the food chain, are divinads. They just kind of, again, they form like their own ruling elite, like their own class, you know, society. Kind of like royals, you know. Divinads are treated like royalty, you know. So very influential, very rich, and, you know, being related to the creator of the universe obviously is going to make you that. Again, they don't have any of the powers. They can't do none of that, but like still, you know. So this is when we get into the second story arc, which by the way, I guess I didn't really talk about that, but in the New Order of the story, I like telling like multiple storylines that all coexist in ones. You know, like one of my favorite filmmakers, Guy Ritchie, his movies are famous for that, where they'll have multiple storylines of characters who do not intermeet until like the very end, or even like sometimes in certain parts of the movies, their story arcs will interact with one another. So that's how New Order specifically, if you could tell by a different number, color variants, each one is its own arc. So there's like 3 storylines that follow 3 different sets of characters, and they do all interact. Right? It's all the same universe. They do involve one another. But generally speaking, like each like episode or comic issue will focus on one of these and how it all concludes into like grand finale of the story arc, right? So the first story arc was the Divines and their family drama and stuff like that. The second one revolves around the New Order, the organization, specifically about the people who rule it. So, you know, first off, there's more, but like these are the main characters. So first off is Armand. Now, Armand is the Grand Chairman of the New Order. The Grand Chairman is like the president, right? And this isn't like a democratic, like free speech thing. No, the Grand Chairman rules as an absolute ruler. What they say is final, and they rule like a dictator, basically. You know, the Grand Chairman are dictators. Armand is a very violent dictator, very brutal in his tactics. You know, this is the type of guy who has no problem experimenting on humans and children. So Armand, ironically enough, even though being a very like not good person, he's actually the child of light, and he was actually the prime child, which you know kind of goes into how did he even get this fucked up. So Armand inherits the Grand Chairman. You know, he kills the last leader and he becomes it after working for them. And when the story of New Order starts, where the story takes place, Armand is the Grand Chairman, but he plans to retire, so he's old. You know, he wants to go to his next generation. And Armand wants to set up a hereditary dictatorship. You know, the decision goes from his child, you know. So Armand does have a son named Louis. And by the way, Armand is French. I made him French just because I like French language. I don't like French people. I don't even like France, the country. But the French language to me just sounds really beautiful. Like, I don't know, I just like how it sounds, you know, French. Oui, oui, monsieur, baguette. It's really nice, okay? So I made him French. And again, race doesn't matter. Like, you could be French and black. It doesn't matter. Nationality, I just picked that just because for fun. But they could be anything. So Armand has a son named Louis. Now, Louis has he has a deformity where like one foot is shorter than the other. So he has to walk with like a leg brace and a cane. And because of that kind of damaged Louis' reputation. No one really wants to like have a cripple as their leader, right? So Armand decides not to give it to him. Not that Louis wanted the role anyway. I want to say Louis, like he saw the brutality that his dad did in order to take his position, you know? To be Grand Chairman of the New Order, you have to be a violent person. You have to like kill any resistance, any person who like opposes you must go, because then if you don't kill them, they'll kill you. That's how it is, right? Armand became Grand Chairman because he killed the last guy, and that guy killed the other guy before him. So it's like a very violent position, and Louis doesn't want any of that. So instead, Armand wants to give the position to his daughter, Clementine. But the New Order has never had a woman Grand Chairman. In fact, the New Order organization is very patriarchal, so women aren't, given that high positions. And while Clementine definitely is a person who can step up to it, she understands the New Order. She knows how to work. She knows that she needs to be brutal, and she's willing to do it because she was raised in that environment. She grew up with the brutality of her dad. But Armand knows that if he puts Clementine in charge, the conflict will just rise. The body counts will get a number bigger. So Armand decides maybe it should be Clementine. Clementine can still be the ruler of the Grand Chairman, just not officially. The title, Grand Chairman, can go to her husband, and she can basically rule him behind. Now, Armand being a divinat, his wife isn't mentioned here. She isn't made that big of a character. So, but his wife was a commoner, a person who was born from humans. I know, lame, right? So Armand giving birth to Clementine, she's now like, Armand himself was half divine, right? His mom, all the divines have like commoner human spouses, or not spouses, they don't get married, but like partners who give birth. So Armand was like half human, half divine. He's a divinat. So Clementine is only like 1/4 of divinat. And so Armand decides, let's go back to the divine bloodline, right? That's like a big thing. I want to say also that divinats only really marry other divinats. So they kind of, again, they create this as a ruling class. Like royalty, it's literally royalty. Royals only marry royals, right? Kings only marry queens. Princes only marry princesses. Divinats only marry divinats. Sometimes they marry commoners, but it's very rare. In fact, Armand marrying a commoner was very rare. So Armand decides to arrange Clementine to marry Javier. Now Javier, first off, he's Mexican. Obviously, I'm Mexican. A lot of characters are going to be Mexican. This is how it works. Javier is the son of wisdom. And you might be thinking to yourself, kind of realizing that isn't that kind of weird? Like Armand is the son of light, and Javier is the son of wisdom. Wisdom and light are siblings. So technically speaking, what does that mean? Clementine is Javier's niece, and Armand and Javier are cousins. True, technically, but like I said, the Divines aren't really like siblings in the sense that you and I understand it. They're siblings by default, because who else can they be related to? So now, plus they're like same age. Again, Armand was born way before, so it's kind of weird, but not really. Like, again, Light obviously refers to Armand as his son, and Clementine as his granddaughter, but like, it shouldn't really be seen as like an incestuous, as there is no like incest. Like DNA speaking, Light and Wisdom are not blood related, really. So their kids doing this, it's kind of weird, but like, there's no incest. Okay, that's what I'm trying to say. So yeah, I'm not a weirdo who likes incest. I'm just saying this is just how it is. Okay, so Javier marries Clementine. Javier, being the son of wisdom, is a smart guy, but he's also very moralistic. Like he wants to. He worked with the New Order before. Wisdom works sometimes with the New Order. She's smart, so they seek her knowledge, and Javier kind of fell into that. He liked the New Order. He wants to kind of like change it. Like when Armand positioned Wisdom, that her son, her prime child, right? Javier is the prime child of Wisdom. She's like the only kid she actually cares about to marry his daughter. Wisdom allowed it only because Armand promised that the position of Grand Chairman will go to Javier, which Wisdom believes is a title worthy of her prime son. And so Javier becomes Grand Chairman, and Javier does accept it because he believes that with his genius of his being raised by the goddess of wisdom, he can like change the New Order. He can change it for the better. New Order has the reputation of being violent, of being brutal, doing these inhumane things. He goes in with the idea that he could change it, that he is good. Of course, what Javier doesn't know is the fact that Armand, even though made him Grand Chairman, has no intention of actually giving power to him. Clementine really is in charge. She wears the pants in their relationship. Which, by the way, Javier and Clementine's relationship, like they get married, but they don't like particularly love each other. Like it's like a royal thing. Like they understand that they will get married because they don't really have like a say in it. Their parents kind of arranged it, and like even if they say no, they can't really say no. So it's not that they don't like each other. Like I want to show Clementine and Javier's relationship is more of that of like friends rather than lovers. It'd be like if you decided to marry your best friend, not because you love them, and it's not in like a romantic sexual way, but just because you guys like each other, you're cool. Why not start a family with your best friend? So that's kind of how it is. At least at the start, that's kind of how it is. But regardless, Javier and Clementine, as the stories go on, they actually do get like actual romantic feelings for one another, and even in the beginning, they have this mutual understanding. They are friends. They have things in common, but it's kind of like, even when they get married, basically, their wedding was basically their first date. So Javier proposing to Clementine was basically him actually asking her out. And even though they're married, they kind of treat it more like of a first-time relationship, right? Which is kind of weird because they're married, but that's just how it is. So Clementine is the one in charge. Again, at the start of the series, Clementine is like, she isn't mean, but she definitely, she doesn't beat around the bush. Javier is very idealistic. He refuses to understand the fact that he needs to be brutal, or else he will die. And Clementine just teaches him the hard way, like you have to know that this is. Javier lived being pampered by his mom and her acolytes, treating him like royalty. He never saw violence, but Clementine grew up with the notion that if her mom wasn't violent, they would all die. She would be executed alongside her father and brother and mother. So a big start of the conflict between this storyline is just Clementine and Javier disagreeing on how to actually run things. Again, Javier thinks he's in charge, but no one really listens to him. Everyone takes Clementine over him. But as the series progresses, like one thing I want to do with Javier is kind of like in Breaking Bad, like the loss of innocence. Like Walter White goes from just a humble high school teacher to a famous drug lord who kills people, right? That's kind of what happens to Javier. At the start of the series, he's like a nice guy who wants to do good. He refuses to kill people. Even people who try to kill him, he doesn't want to kill them because he knows that's the wrong way. But as the series progresses, things get worse and he sees the actual like brutality of it all. He becomes very like stoned by it, or he becomes more cynical. Like the experience ruined him, and by the end of the series, he becomes more violent than Clementine. Like at the start, Clementine kills people who like disrespect her because she sees that as a potential threat. Okay, but in the end of the series, Javier just kills people just cause to scare people. And yet, so at the start, Clementine is the brutal one, and Javier is like the innocent child. But at the end of the series, Javier becomes like the villain, and Clementine is the one who's actually trying to stop him from killing people. And so that's a big conflict that they changed over time. Is Javier's loss of innocence going from like the good characters. Again, none of these are really the good guys, at least not to get to later, but Javier is definitely the protagonist in terms of like the New Order storyline. We see the world, the stories through his perspective, you know? He is the protagonist of that. And a big conflict of interest is between these two. Which, by the way, another thing I want to mention, like Clementine, I want her to be albino. Like, she has albinism. You know, her hair is like silver white, her skin is like super pale. I know there's like two types of albinism. One was like people are like pink or pinkish, and there's one where one is just super white, like unnaturally like whiteboard white. Okay, not like white people white, like whiteboard white. Clementine is the whiteboard white. Which is something that she's also very like insecure about is her albinism. You know, people are obviously gonna point and say like, oh, that's the albino, but Javier doesn't mind it. In fact, he thinks Clementine's albinism is actually very beautiful, and which kind of helps the relationship later on as Clementine. Again, she kind of agrees subconsciously to marry Javier because she figured, she's albino. No one's gonna want her. No one wants to marry an albino girl. Someone who looks that pale and has white hair, super, white. So I guess subconsciously deep down she kind of accepted that because she figured this is the best that she gets. And Javier, he knew about Clementine's albinism before marrying, but he still chose it because he still saw her beautiful. He didn't mind her albinism. So yeah. Besides that, Javier, at the start, he's like awkward. He isn't nearly as confident in himself, and like when he speaks, Clementine has to speak for him. But as the series goes on, he becomes a dictator. Like Javier, by the end of the series, becomes exactly what Armand was, which is ironic. So only Javier wanted, like he doesn't hate Armand, but he sees Armand as like wrong. What he did. Javier can never be like that. He would be different. He would be better. But in the series, Javier, he becomes another Armand. He's like a dictator, full and full. He even establishes like a cult of personality where people kind of, kind of like Trump supporters, they kind of see him as something more than just a person, like coupled with his divinehood, his mom being a goddess, and the fact that he's like the leader of his powerful organization, he's kind of seen as not a god, but like people kind of hold him in a super high regard, a cult of personality. I'll probably put like the Google explanation here, but like people start wearing armbands with like his name on it. And like he becomes a dictator by the end of the series. He's completely taking full control of the organization. This is his group now. New Order, when Armand was in charge, it was his group. But now Javier is in charge. He gets, undermines Clementine. He is in charge now. He starts the series as the hero, but he ends up becoming the villain at the end. So that's what it is. Now, if you don't see, they have kids. Clementine, Javier, and Louis have children. This is because I actually have like a big time jump. There's like two time jumps in the Stop and Ward, right? So the first part is, everyone's getting ready, they all meet, Javier and Clementine eventually have kids, once they get comfortable with each other. They're all like little kids. The second time jump, the kids are like teenagers and they become more involved with the New Order, even holding positions and stuff like that. That's the first time jump, actually, I'm doing a horrible jump spelling, I'm sorry, but like the first time jump is when they get aged up a bit, the kids get older. Javier starts becoming a lot more, cruel in his methods, and he begins to undermine Clementine a lot more. In the second time jump, Javier is dead. He died, his kids are now full adults, and now there's like a power struggle between his children and his nephews and nieces over who gets to lead the New Order after his death. But we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. Now let's explain the children, right? So Javier and Clementine have 6 kids. Okay, another sidetrack, Javier does have a brother named Jose. But when I say brother, Jose, like Wisdom didn't give birth to Jose. Jose is Javier's clone. So, like Javier being the Grand Shaman has body doubles, but he decided, it's like a cloning experiment that New Order does. It's imperfect. Javier decided to clone himself instead of having body doubles to kind of just perfect the illusion. And his clone came out retarded. Like Jose came out fully grown body like Javier, but his mind was still mentally as a child. So normally they would have executed him, but Javier decided to, have Jose be raised like his brother. Javier calls Jose his brother. And then throughout the series, as, time jumps and all that, Jose actually becomes like an adult. He actually functions. And he still serves as body double. In fact, a plot line I want to have is the Jose who's standing in for Javier has like a bombing attempt made against him. And like half his like body is completely burned and destroyed. So Javier has him be implanted with like cybernetic implants, kind of like a cyborg. But so like on his side of his face and his arm, but not a cyborg as in like, cyborg from the DC superhero. More like a Terminator, like it's like an exoskeleton. So he's like terrifying because he has like this robotic skeleton Terminator hand. So that's what happens to Jose, right? That's big character. I kind of included because I thought it'd be fun, but like Jose isn't really Javier's brother, as in the sense that they have to say like naturally Jose is just a clone of Javier, who Javi decides to keep around and call him his brother. So yeah, like his twin brother, I guess. They're like identical twins. But yeah. Anyway, back to the kids. So the oldest child between Clementine and Javier is Victor. Victor is a lot like Victor wants to be like his dad, but he isn't near like. And in the series, Javier becomes a lot more charismatic, and he knows how to like tell people what to do. He takes more control in, right? Victor wants to be like that, but he's nowhere near as like as smart as his dad. He's nowhere near as charismatic or as strategic as his dad, even though he really wants to be. In fact, I want Victor to kind of have like an inferiority complex, mostly due to the fact that Victor was born as a BEK, a black-eyed kid. His eyes are completely black. He has no pupils. Like there's no white. Like I'm not gonna show you guys my eyes because I'm secretive like that. But his eyes are just pitch black. There's no color behind there. And which is kind of like a thing that abnormal. It just kind of exists here. There's a lot of weird stuff like that. That's just normal in the New Order. So Victor constantly, he's not blind, but he can still see fine. He sees pupils, he just can't see because it's black. So he constantly wears sunglasses, like even indoors. He's insecure like that. He never takes off his sunglasses. And so I want to say because of his BEK, his black eyes, he was supposed to be Javier's successor. But just like Armand, who didn't want Louis for his, condition, Javier decided to skip on Victor. And he didn't decide not to raise him as a successor, which affected Victor very deeply. He, inferiority complex. He feels like he's not worthy. He wants to be. In fact, Javier died before really choosing a successor among his children. So Victor tries really hard to be that. He lives up to his dad's cult of personality. Like he wears the armband and everything. He like talks about his dad like he was some like divine being. And so Victor has his own little group following. He's popular in the New Order. People will see him as a successor. But he isn't. Again, he's not nearly as like smart or strategic as his dad. Nowhere near as charismatic. But he tries it. He definitely tries. Even he is a bit more of a hothead, and he constantly, is more prone to his emotions and emotional outbursts and stuff like that. But yeah, so Victor is the first one. Then you have Susanna, who's their daughter, eldest daughter. Susanna, which unique name, is not really a French name unlike the other ones. I want to say Clementine's mom, Armand's wife, was actually like Polish, and her name was Susanna. That's why Clementine named her Susanna after her grandma, who was dead by that point. Not a major character, like I said. So Susanna is a brat. She is spoiled, which makes sense. She grew up in an unimaginable wealthy family, so she grew up being very spoiled. Not necessarily spoiled as in like a mean one. Like she doesn't look down on poor people. She's just like ignorant, like she's rich and doesn't really understand the fact that none other people live like this. So spoiled, she's just, that's her defining character trait is that she's Clementine also kind of spoiled, not nearly as much. She understands her situation. Her mom grew up poor, so she knows. But, Susanna doesn't have that connection, she's also a Debonad, being second generation. So she's very spoiled. Susanna does get married and have a daughter. Her husband, again, not a major character, he dies pretty soon, big plot point. But she does have a daughter named Anatova, Russian name. Susanna's husband was Russian. And Anatova is not really her mom. Anatova is also kind of rebellious. In fact, by the time, this takes place in the far future, right? Anatova, but by the way, the whole New Order takes place in the far future. It doesn't take place in the 2000s, more like the 2100s, so it takes place far into the future. But Anatova is obsessed with cybernetic implant, and she's constantly implanting herself with various cybernetic, cyberpunk, She has like a detachable eyes that a wire connects to the internet, or she has a chip in the back of her brain that lets her to just place shit in her mind. She's obsessed, kind of like someone who's obsessed with tattoos and they constantly get tattoos. She's like that, but with cutting open herself, removing her organ instead of putting robotic parts instead. So that's her whole thing. And she's very hacker, fucking internet, stuff like that. Kind of not like her mom, who was, would never dream of doing something like that, but she plays a big role. She's kind of the same age as her youngest, the youngest siblings between them. So, Susanna gave birth at a young age. So not underage or anything, but in her early 20s, stuff like that, so. And there's Anatova, so she's the third generation. Now the next son is Enrique. In fact, Enrique and Arturo are the next two. Enrique and Arturo are twins. They're non-identical twins though. They don't really look the same, but they're twins. So Enrique, who I'll just probably call Ricky. I was gonna originally write Ricky, but I decided to go with Enrique. Spanish names, Javier's Mexicans. I was gonna get Spanish names. Now Enrique is Javier's favorite child, which is made kind of not so subtle, right? Javier wanted Enrique to be his successor, but Enrique doesn't want to be his successor. Like Enrique works with the New Order, but he does not want to be like Enrique was like his dad when he was young. He does not believe he has it himself to be as brutal to like control this organization. You know, he's not nearly as confident in himself either. Enrique is definitely a lot more like strategic. Like he understands situations. Something I guess he inherited from his grandma, you know, wisdom. But you know, people constantly want him to get involved. You know, people all in the New Order come to him to like handle the drama, which we'll get into a bit in that story arc. But he doesn't want to. You know, he wants to remove himself. But he's constantly, you know, every time he's out, they pull him right back in. You know, he wants to not be involved, but he just can't because his family is so involved, and he's, you know, pretty smart actually. Like he could be Grand Chairman if he really wanted to. He just doesn't want to. You know. Another thing about Enrique is that he also has an abnormality. A lot of these have abnormalities. Kind of like, I want to hint that our mom was like cursed by a witch before. That's why a lot of his like descendants kind of have some things with them. But Enrique has like a withered arm. You ever seen a withered arm? It means like not enough skin or flesh grew or like muscle. So it's a very bony hand compared to like the rest of the body. And usually withered arm means the person has like no control. Like they can't move it. They can't even move their fingers. It's just stuck like that. And they can't do anything about it. But obviously this looks in the future. So Enrique doesn't get cybernetic implants because I want to say he has like doesn't like that. Instead he has like an arm brace, like a robotic piece of like equipment that allows him to control his hand, even though it's still withered and he can actually move it like normal. But he has like this hunk of a metal on his arm, and he has to wear it all the time. So you know his hand just won't work. So that's about him. Like I said, he's smart, but he's not very confident in himself, which is why he doesn't put himself there. Victor kind of holds like a grudge against Enrique, kind of taking away what he saw was his. But Victor doesn't hate Enrique. Enrique feels like Victor does. Enrique, like, people want him to be Grand Chairman. Enrique constantly says like, no, go for Victor, go for my brother. You know, he should be in charge. But a lot of people don't see him that way, you know. So there's kind of that little like drama between Victor and Enrique. That Victor, he's the oldest. He feels like he should be the successor, but Enrique is just better. And Victor knows Enrique is better for the position, but he just refuses to admit it. Enrique doesn't want the position. He wants Victor to take it, but you know, Victor doesn't believe him. So that's the drama there. Arturo, on the other hand, no, he's fine. He's just a psychopath. Okay, Arturo's whole thing is that he's violent. He likes fights. He likes, you know, killing people. Like he enjoys murder. So he's scary. He's a scary guy. He runs with a little band of his friends who they just go around killing people. No, for no reason though. He doesn't kill for no reason. He kills for a reason. That's for Victor. Whenever Victor gets into an argument with another member of the New Order, when he feels threatened or he wants a message to be sent, he sends Arturo to do that. You know, Arturo is Victor's like lapdog that he sends to like harm people he doesn't like. All the other siblings tried Arturo to calm down and, you know, help him with his anger issues, which, you know, is what it is. But Victor constantly encourages it because he sees Arturo as like his right-hand man, you know, his enforcer. And so there's like a drama there also. Especially with the next sibling, Noel. French name, actually. Noel or Noel. I guess kind of pronounced Noel. Kind of dumb pronounced, so I say Noel. Noel is the next girl, you know, daughter. She, you know, she doesn't want to be involved with the New Order either. But she cares a lot about her siblings, and she kind of sees herself as one thing really holding them together, you know. She's afraid that they'll die. She's afraid that someone's going to kill them, and so she tries to, you know, like help Arturo with his, you know, anger issues. She wants Susanna, who, like, you know, after the death of her husband, she gets depressed and stuff like that. She's kind of like her mom. She understands the position she's in, but she tries to make the best of it, you know. She wants to also change the New Order, but she doesn't really have the position or the power to do so. Again, you know, very patriarchal. Women aren't appreciated that much in this. And she constantly uses that by Victor, you know. She kind of works as a conduit between Victor and the next conflict also. So that's something that she and Enrique, which probably, you know, Enrique and Noah are like close, more close than any of the other siblings, because they both have the same view. You know, they want the New Order to be better. They want it to succeed. But they just don't have the, you know, power to do so. And so they're constantly just trying their best to do whatever they can with their brother and their cousin, which we'll get into. I'm building a lot to it. So that's her whole thing. Noelle, not really conditioned, but she has that one condition, I forgot the name of it, I'll probably put it here also, where like, it's kind of like albinism, but it's only half. You know, like half of her hair is white, the other half is black, you know, they have black hair. And not really the skin thing, but like, she's also kind of pale. And, I don't know, it's like a weird thing, I'll put it up, like a picture of it, but she also has like half of her hair is white and half is black. Not because she died, it's just how she is. She has like half albinism. Susanna isn't albino, none of the other ones are albino. She's the only one who really carry it over, you know. Which, by the way, albinism isn't really hereditary, like, our mom isn't albino, neither was Clementine's mom. She just came out that way. This is, like I said, I want to hint that our mom was like cursed, and that's why a lot of his children have like abnormalities as descendants. But you know, we'll get later on that. And the youngest sibling, between Javier and Clementine is Dennis, which is actually a French name. I was surprised by that also. Dennis just sounds like an English name, but no, it's French. Dennis is a he's spoiled, but not in the sense of like Zana, who's like, goes to fine dinners, wears like the best clothing, and very elegant, kind of like her wisdom. Dennis is spoiled, and he lives in like a yacht. All he wants to do is party and have sex and do drugs. That's all he does. Dennis is not involved at all. Like a running joke is that fact that the siblings forget Dennis even like exists. Which by Dennis is also like a mama's boy, so Clementine constantly babies him. Like Dennis, he lives in a yacht. He's partying the yacht in the ocean all the time. He gets pulled over by police from different countries, and Clementine is always bailing him out of prison. Victor also, Arturo constantly like stop people from because Dennis is kind of like a playboy. He sleeps with like girls from the wives or daughters of other New Order members, and so Victor and Arturo constantly not to bail him out by either killing or threatening the other people into silence. And so Dennis is kind of a troublemaker, although not really. He's more self-destructive than anything. Like he doesn't purposely go out his way to harm his family. He just does it because he's dumb. He does drugs. He's a party animal. He doesn't know any better, He's definitely the youngest. In fact, him and Anatoly are not even that far off of age. Like maybe Dennis is only like 10 years older. Not a lot. But again, he's not as involved in New Order like at all. But he's there. He plays his own little thing. And both family kind of treat him as a baby, which kind of just feeds into the self-destructive nature he has. So kind of a sad story. But yeah. Besides the siblings themselves and the granddaughter, Louis also has sons. His wife isn't as that important of a character either. So, I like to think there's a good amount of female and male characters, which there's a lot more later, but yeah. So, he has 2 kids, a son and a daughter. His son is Rene. Rene wants to be grand chairman also, Rene saw his dad being ignored by his grandpa for position of grand chairman as like a betrayal, Rene believed that he is the rightful heir to the grand chairman position, It was his grandpa that started it. And he felt that his dad getting excluded, even though Louis didn't mind getting excluded, he didn't want to be grand chairman. Rene doesn't see it that way. He feels that the grand chairman belongs to him. Kind of like how Victor sees that title belonging to him because his dad was it. Rene sees it because of his grandpa. And so a big conflict, especially around this later generation storyline, the first generation conflict was between Clement and Javier and their relationship. The second one is one between Victor and Rene, as they both want grand chairman, and obviously there can only be one. And like I said, violent position, so it's the family. Because, they're obviously raised, Clementine and Louis are close, and so they raise their kids, they're cousins, but they're pretty close all together. So there's like a big thing, Victor and Rene hate each other, and they want to kill each other for that position, So that's all big storyline. Rene, however, is an asshole, he's definitely the cruelest out of the bunch. Like, even Arturo is scared of Rene, he's not afraid to get his hands dirty, Rene would rather burn the New World, destroy it completely, if it meant no one else will take it. If he can't have it, no one else will take it. That's his view of the world, right? So Rene has no problem. In fact, I want to say that deep down, he kind of wants to just kill his entire relatives to secure the position for himself. Absolutely. It's not only Victor, but Enrique or Arturo can also claim that position. Even Susana as well. So for Rene, it's scorched earth, total war, So that's the big conflict in the next one. Rene also has a sister, Adelaide. Adelaide is also kind of like Susana, as if she's spoiled. However, unlike Susana, who I said she's kind of more just like the mindless, spoiled one, like she isn't particularly mean, she's just, ignorant to her position. Adelaide is mean. Adelaide is spoiled, and she looks down on poor people, okay? She is mean. She's an asshole, okay? So, she doesn't have the redemption that Susana has. Like, the older Susana gets, especially after her daughter, she gets less spoiled and more, and understanding of how life is for other people. Adelaide never gets that. No one likes her. None of them, not even Rene really likes her that much. She's just an asshole and hard to get along with. With that being said, though, Louis and Clementine actually want Adelaide to marry Enrique. They want their kids to marry each other. They want Enrique and Adelaide are cousins, by the way, but they want that marriage to happen. They kind of see this as a way of securing the bloodline. Because if Adelaide has kids, then that might cause more conflict. I'm literally seeing it with Rene and Victor. So the idea is have the two marry. Adelaide and Enrique do not want to marry each other. First off, they think it's gross because they're cousins. Adelaide thinks very little of Enrique. She sees him as like a loser, someone who can very clearly take a position but doesn't want to for no reason. At least for her, for no reason. And Enrique doesn't want to marry Adelaide because she's a bitch. She's mean to him, so he doesn't want to. So that's the whole thing happening there. Obviously, like I said, I already know who's going to win in the conflict between those two, but I feel like that's something a storyline we can get into later in a future video maybe. So that's what I'm giving you more. So that's the second storyline, which itself is kind of split into two, right? There's the first generation, which I call it, and then there's the second generation. So really it's like 4 storylines, but this one doesn't happen too much later, and so it really is only 3. So the first storyline is the Divines and their, sibling rivalries and stuff like that. Second storyline is the New Order, the organization, specifically the family, or the 2 families that control the whole thing, and their, conflict with each other and others, The New Order gets the conflict with the United Nations. They get the conflict with the Rosarian Church. They have they get the conflict with even the Divines themselves, like their acolytes and things interfere, and there's all that. So that's the whole thing. But the third storyline, definitely the more unique of them, revolves around these 6 girls. So the best way I can describe them, or their whole storyline, is that all 6 of them were either the children, the daughters, they're all girls, of a New Order member or hierarchy member, or they were the result of an inhumane experience conducted to them by Armand. So their whole thing is that when Javier took over, he learned about Armand's inhumane treatment of children. So he decided, felt really bad, and he decided to free them of their captivity basically and enroll them, because like I said, New Order is like its own government. They have their own school for children of members of that. So Javier decided to pretty much become their sponsor. Like Javier, he basically adopts them, not officially, but he definitely sees them as his kids, and he decides to give them a school life, give them a normal life. So because of this, so 6 of them, it's Fate, Eloise, Aisha, Rachel, Lori, and Eve. 6 of them, their whole thing is kind of very detached from it, whereas this is all about like family dramas. Their whole thing, I can describe it as like a high school magical girl superpower things. They go to high school, or at least the New Order version of high school, like a private school, and they have teenage drama. They have to deal with tests, they have to deal with, their jobs, they have to get jobs, they have to deal with like, their boyfriends and stuff like that, It sounds very different from the rest of it. It's because I purposely wanted to kind of just be like a tone, like a whiplash. Like their story is so like different from what's going on over here. It's kind of like funny, It's more comedic than the rest. Like their whole storyline is them going on missions, right? So like, okay, Javier gets these 6 girls, right? They all have special abilities for the most part. And Javier decides he calls them the dolls. So the dolls kind of form a team, and he gives them special missions to go out and fight, out their enemies, horrors beyond our imagination. So, and it's kind of treated like magic girl superpowers thing. They have their suits, they have costumes, they have powers, they go fight, and they deal with, homework, like a classic teenage superhero story, right? Of course, it's a lot more violent than those stories usually tend to be. That's how it is. So, to describe their powers and what they do. So, the first one is Fate. Fate, her whole thing is that she's the daughter of a high-ranking New Order member, right? And her dad was like a researcher, and he found this device, which I haven't actually came up with a name with it. I just kind of call it a device. But this device is like the shape of an eyeball, and it actually has the power to let people manipulate time. And its origins are unknown. It's kind of like a mystery how this thing came to be, who made it, or anything like that. But the New Order spent decades trying to figure out how to actually activate it, They began a process. They know they can activate if you scoop someone's eyeball out and put it in there. It'll activate because it needs contact with flesh. But it always fucks up and never really works and ends up killing the person. So one day, when, it was bring your daughter to work day, Faye snuck into her dad's laboratory where he was trying to figure out how to work that thing. And her being a little girl playing around, that thing is kind of sentient, not really, but it detects whenever it finds a suitable host to activate it. It basically crawled out, attached itself to Faye, fucking removed her eyeball. Keep in mind, it was like a little girl, she's 10 years old. Attached itself into it, and it worked. She was able to control it. At first, not really. She time travel. She doesn't time travel. She doesn't go different times. She manipulates time. That's her whole thing. So she can cause events that happen in the future happen now without actually changing the future. The best example I can give of is that, let's say she gets locked behind the door, right? And she knows in the future someone's going to open that door and she'll get out. But at the present, she can't. So what she does is she manipulates time. She causes the events of the future to happen. She gets behind, in front of the door, but without actually going to the future. It's still the present, but the actions of what happened in the future happen in the present. And it's very confusing. Time travel is always confusing, but her power is that she can manipulate time and cause things to happen in the future. Even the past happen in the present, and even cause the present to happen in the future. It's very confusing, I know, but like as the story goes on, I'll iron out the details later. But that's her whole thing. But Fate is that her eye, I guess her left eye, I kind of just imagine her left eye, is this like device that's like golden yellow, and it's like very bright, and so she can't at first she can't control it. She kind of just zap it in time, and she has like a hard time controlling it. But after years of research and not very good tactics, she did eventually learn it a little bit. The New Order created another device for her to help control it, which again no name. I just call it the second device. It's like this little thing that she puts on the side of her face, kind of like a moon crescent that revolves around her eye, and she can like touch it, and it helps activate the power and keep it in check. Without it, like if she just activates the her eye, device eye, without like the extra crescent, it's almost impossible for her to control. She'll zapping between time, and it causes like a manipulation she can't be control. But with the device on her side, it gives her the ability to actually control it, and she can actually manipulate when she wants to. She can actually she can even see the future. She can see exactly people's futures and see events that will happen. So that's her whole thing. Very overpowered. So it's hard to kill someone who knows your next move, right? So that's her whole thing. Obviously, the device isn't active all the time, and most of the time it's actually dormant, and she can activate it whenever she wants, especially with the crescent thing. And so, just to make people not feel that weird about it, she wears like an eye patch, and it covers her eye. And not only that, but she also needs glasses, so she wears glasses on top of it because she can't see good. So her character design is like she has this crescent but without it, she has an eye patch and she has glasses, like regular glasses over it. So one eye is like an eye patch with glasses over it. Fun this character design, if you ask me. Now as her fates, and yeah, it's funny. Her name is Fate. Time travel. I know I'm so clever, but her whole personality is the fact that she's like a bookworm. She's nerdy. She loves doing math. She loves reading. She's she's pretty smart, not genius or anything, but she's smart. For her, it's the classic archetype of a bookworm. For her, for Fate, having fun means reading. It means going to the library. It means reading about arthropods or math equations and shit like that. So she's that. She's an overachiever. All her grades she gets A's in everything. She always wants to achieve everything. She gets frustrated easily when she doesn't know what to do, especially on missions. And she's very smart at math and stuff like that. She's not very smart when it actually comes to people. So that's something that kind of holds her back. She doesn't know really good to interacting with people. Not really awkward, just kind of, I don't know, she talks like a robot sometimes, just doesn't really good at that. She's very intelligent, the bookworm thing, she loves reading, she loves doing math, she loves doing science and stuff like that. But she's very overachiever. She gets easily frustrated if she doesn't know the answer to stuff. And she still needs to learn about how to have fun and lose herself and not worry about, being the best and just doing what you want, doing what you can. You don't have to achieve everything perfectly, That's her whole thing. So that's Fate. Next one is Aisha. Aisha is interesting because she was also an experiment, not related to anyone, just an experiment. Her whole thing is that she was injected with dragon DNA. So her whole thing is that, dragons existed in the New Order universe, but they ended up going extinct due to hunting them down. They were seen as a threat by the New Order ages ago, so they hunted them down to extinction. But DNA of dragons still existed. So what the New Order under Armand decided to do was, hey, how about we inject DNA of dragons into people and see what happens? What happens was to Aisha, the young girl who they did it to, because children, it's easier to experiment on them, was that the DNA mixed with her DNA, and she kind of became like a dragon-human hybrid. Her design isn't really like a furry, she isn't like a dragon that's humanoid that walks on two legs and has arms and it's not the dragon face. It's more like a anime cat girl, anime cat girls. I call cat girls, even though the only cat things about them is that they have the ears and the tail, maybe whiskers. Besides that, they're basically just human. It's kind of her thing, She has a dragon's tail. She has kind of the reptile skin on her arm, not really covering her whole face or body, but she has that, and also the camouflage, lots of power, kind of like a chameleon. She can breathe fire, just like a dragon. Super strong, obviously her skin is bulletproof. She has the wings of a dragon that are detractable, and they can go inside and hide, and they can just come out whenever they want. Kind of very reptile-y. But yeah, she isn't fully dragon. She's still largely human, just a few dragon aspects of her. She can crawl on walls, fly, and wings, and yeah. In terms of her personality, Aisha is a goth, not a hardcore goth. She doesn't put on the white face paint or wears the super typical goth style. She's more middle ground goth. Like she still wears, black, like the earrings, black lipstick. She still wears largely black. She's very moody and very sarcastic, and also kind of a misanthrope. She doesn't like people. See, Faye is terrible at talking to people. Aisha doesn't like talking to people at all. So that's what she's like the goth. Not a hardcore goth, but not like a fake goth either, kind of like a middle ground, I'm sure some of you are goths, you'll know, but that's our whole thing. And these are all friends, by the way. Like, at first, they kind of don't like each other because they're very drastically different personalities, but over time, they become friends, very good friends. So that's Aisha. Next, Eloise. Eloise is a ghost. She's a ghost girl. She's literally just a ghost who does not descend to afterlife. She was alive, but she died. If you couldn't tell by the arrow, Eloise is actually the daughter of Ramon. She's actually another sibling of Louis and Clementine. Eloise actually died when she was a child, and the siblings' mom, Susanna, couldn't accept her daughter's death, so she traded her life to Rust in exchange for Eloise. The problem was that Susanna didn't know Eloise's body was already like decomposed and rotted, and the thing about bringing people back to life is that their body has to be intact. If not, then the person comes back, but as a ghost. A spirit that cannot transcend to the afterlife, which is what happened to Eloise. So she's now just stuck as a ghost girl roaming the earth. Besides that, her physical appearance, normal person. She's like really pale also, kind of like you can almost see through her, kind of. Like she's a ghost, but she's still physical. You can still touch her. She could like choose to like go through people and like walls and shit, but she's still like physically there. She can also float, not fly. She can't fly to the sky, but she can float, But yeah, she's like, almost see-through pale. Her eyes are like gray and almost like dead. You ever seen like the eyes of a dead person? Like it's kind of like that. There's like no soul behind there. She doesn't have soul. She's a ghost. Besides that, she can like, talk to other ghosts. She can conjure spirits. She can she can possess people and objects. One thing that Eloise can do is she just touch people and they just die because she can just do that. She also like suck the souls out of people and use that as like weapons against them. So it's kind of overpowered. Eloise also, she likes to sing. And I want to say that, like, because being a ghost, her singing, like, transcends life and death. It's, like, very powerful. It's just a very powerful sing, almost like magic in and itself. So that's one thing also. As for her personality, Eloise is a girly girl. She loves pink. She loves the color pink. She, like, dresses like a princess. By the way, they're older ages. That would be, like, teenagers. I'd probably put them, like, 15 or 16. Maybe 17, like they're teenagers, not like super young, but they're teenagers. So Eloise is definitely the most childish out of them all, which makes sense. She dies as a child, she did kind of age a little bit, which you want to ask how a ghost ages. Don't worry about it. Don't think about it too much. But yeah, she's a girly girl. She loves baking. She loves watching romantic comedies. She's very super energetic, almost over hyper to the fact that she kind of annoys the rest, which is how. She's also very positive. Like, she's dead and a ghost, but she's very positive about things. Like, she definitely has the strongest will, and she's, like, the least prone to actually feeling sad or depression. So, she's definitely, like, the optimistic one in the group very much. And, like I said, she's very talkative. But, like, she's talkative in an awkward way also, where people just kind of get, like, not annoyed, but just kind of feel like, oh, So, you ever talk to someone who talks a lot? It kind of makes you uncomfortable. Not because they're saying it's uncomfortable, but they just talk too much. It's kind of her. So, that's her whole thing, So, again, contrast with Aisha, who's a goth, and she's, like, the girly girl pink. And Faye, this is a bookworm. But the next one is Rachel. Now, Rachel is, before we get to Rachel, we have to get to another concept that exists in New Order. In the New Order universe, there exists a virus, which again, I haven't come up with the name of it. I just call it the virus. But the virus causes people to go feral. They basically turn into like zombies. They increasingly want to attack people and kill them. One thing that causes them is that their like mouth grows and like the side opens. Kind of like a Glasgow smile. That was my inspiration, actually, is a Glasgow smile. Which, if you see Peaky Blinders, you know what I'm talking about? It's like a thing when people cut their faces by like gangs to give them like a smile, to see that their mouth stretched. That's what happens to them, but like their mouth goes. Another one was the Japanese legend, the slit mouth woman. That's also one big thing that inspired this one. And this virus causes people like who get it, they grow like rows of sharp teeth like sharks. Their mouths open increasingly and they become feral. They become like cannibals. They eat and attack people. It's a virus that like affects the existing New Order. Now, however, Rachel is unique as she contracted the virus, but she did not go feral. She has like the sharp claws also in her hand and the mouth thing where it get gates and sharp rows of teeth, but she didn't go feral, and it kind of like a mystery as to how that happened, which is why she was taken by the New Order. But she's completely in control, She was still experimented on though, and for whatever reason, the New Order decided to implant her with like blades that can like detach from her wrist, kind of like two swords from both of her hands, just cause I guess. So that's her whole thing. Is Rachel does that. She has this virus. She's like immune to it, obviously, but it doesn't affect her. She doesn't go feral. They're still kind of worried. Like, all her friends are kind of secretly scared that she might go feral, even though it's just kind of like another drama between them. In terms for her personality, Rachel is a diva. She cares a lot about like fashion. She wants to be the most fashionable one out there. Cares a lot about like she's a popular girl at school, right? Even with her like oddities, she's popular. She's very gorgeous. She's like type of girl who doesn't really want to like avoid missions. She constantly avoids doing like hard work because she's afraid it might break her nails. She's very kind of girly also. But again, she's a diva. She's the popular girl. She has a TikTok page. She does dances. Stuff like that. So she hates anything getting dirty. She hates like physical manual labor. She's always the one that complains about missions, especially if it makes her like get dirty. She hates that. Very fashionable. She's a diva. She's a diva. We all know the popular girl in school, right? She's not mean though. Like most popular girls in schools are mean, but she's not. She's actually really nice, and she actually gets along with people just fine. Like her and Eloise especially get along a lot due to the fact that they're both very girly, and so that's what I'll do. So that's with Rachel. Next one is Eve. Eve. This one's gonna sound goofy, and it kind of is, but like I liked it, so I'm doing it. So. Again, dragons exist in the New Order universe, but so do unicorns and Pegasus. Unicorns are horses with the horns, and Pegasus are horses with wings. Unicorns also went extinct, and this is because a unicorn's horn can conjure magic. You ever see Harry Potter have to use wands to cast magic? That's basically with the unicorn's wand. So people would kill unicorns just to take their horns and use it for magic spells. And they're very powerful. So magic exists. Magic exists in the New Order world, which you can't figure it out. There's no like rules to the magic. You can literally cast anything and anywhere. But the New Order, like the United Nations ban magic, and the New Order, like they essentially collect all the horns for themselves, and they don't do it because magic is too powerful, and they don't want people having access to that. Which the United Nations banned magic not because they wanted to, because Rust and the Divines chose. Rust thought magic was too powerful, especially since he's the conjurer of all magic. So that's the thing. But a scientist at the New Order also ask themselves, what if we surgically stitch and implant a unicorn's horn and a Pegasus wings on a human? Will it work? And of course, they chose a little girl to do that, and that's where Eve comes in. And it worked. She has the horn of a unicorn coming out of her forehead, and she has Pegasus wings. And they're like, bird wings. Not like Aisha's dragon wings, which are like more reptilian. Hers is like, an eagle's wings, And hers are not detachable. Her wings are constantly out because she can't put them in. So she just has wings in the back. But yeah, Eve, like the magic, she can cast spells with her horn as like a wand, and her magic, again, Limitless doesn't explain it, but like it causes her to have headache because the magic has like a negative effects on her brain, and so like at first she was unable to control it, and she was kind of just casting spells and doing destructions. So what the New Order did was that they like tattooed symbols that were supposed to help her control her magic, either by reading them or just having them on her. And so not a whole lot of tattoos, like none in her face, mostly in her arms and her legs, like her thighs. So Eve, like she truly is like kind of like not shy or embarrassed, but just kind of like she thinks it's ugly, so she hides it. She wears a lot of like baggy clothes to hide that. But yeah, Eve is like tattoos of like these archaic symbols that was like help her control her magic and stuff like that. But Eve, in terms of personality, she's like a basket case. She's a wallflower. She's super shy. She's like really embarrassed by her like wings and her horn. She can't hide them. It's always very real. And even if she does hide them, people can still see her tattoos. Which, a little girl, a teenager girl having tattoos, like obviously that's gonna be weird, right? So she's like, avoids people. She just likes to be by herself. Even if she's embarrassed, but she also just likes to be by herself. She's like an introvert, She just wants to be by herself. She's also kind of geeky. Like, Faye is nerdy because she likes math and science. Eve is geeky because she's into like, geek stuff, like, like Star Wars or Marvel, but like this universe equivalent of that, So she likes to keep to herself, shy. She's very soft-spoken. She like hates being the center of attention. She's completely fine with just being in the background. So these are really her only friends though. Like all of these girls have lives outside of their group, but Eve doesn't really, So Eve and Fate get along the most because they're both like, oddballs. Eve is kind of weird also. She doesn't really know how to talk to people. Like Fate is awkward and weird as in the sense she's like a robot. She doesn't really know how to express her emotions. Eve is weird because she just is weird and doesn't know how to talk to people, and she just either over shares too much or just acts like a meanie even though she isn't because she just doesn't understand the talking. So that's her whole thing. Is that she's a unicorn horn, cast magic and stuff like that. So yeah, that's Eve's thing. And finally, the last one is Glory. Now, you couldn't tell by Glory's era, Glory is actually the Debonair of War, but she isn't the prime child though. Glory's dad is War, but War doesn't even know Glory exists. That's the whole thing. Well, yeah, but War, unlike the other girls, who kind of have like a power or a special ability or something that gives them, Glory doesn't. She was like adopted by the New Order basically. They take in like Debonaires and they like help to secure them a position in there where they can show their worth. Glory being the daughter of War, well, she's very prone to combat. She's an expert fighter, expert sharpshooter. She's the best and stuff like that. And so, Glory was actually Armand's, well, not Armand, but like, Glory joined the team not because she was part of this group funded by Javier. She was just a student at the school that they went to, and she heard about it. She learned about their whole thing. She wanted to join, and they did because they liked her, and she was very good at it. Even if she didn't have powers or special abilities, so she was a skilled fighter and a shooter. So they kept her in anyway. But yeah, they taught an underage girl how to shoot guns and fight people. This is how it works. It shouldn't be surprising anymore, So that's Glory's whole thing. Not a major character thing. I kind of just want to bring it up mostly because again, just like their race, their sexuality isn't that important either. Like some of these characters are gay. In fact, Renee, I specifically want to be gay, just because I feel like it sets them apart from like other characters. But Glory, one thing I do want to say is that she is transgender. Glory is a male or female transgender. Again, not a really important storyline. Like, if this ever does happen, I'll never have like a character explicitly say that. Glory's never gonna come up to someone and say, "Hey, I'm transgender." No. It's just something that's kind of like hinted at and shown in the background. Like maybe Glory's room has the transgender flag, and maybe like Glory isn't her birth name. Okay, she has like a dead name, like a very male one. She chose the name Glory, and maybe every now and then, like when she's reporting to the New Order, they'll use her dead name because they haven't updated her, and she'll be like, that's not my name. Glory's my name. So it's something like not a major character, important to her character, but just something I kind of, I like being diverse. I'm a diverse storyteller. I love having, you boy is a woke, diverse guy. And, I just felt like having a transgender character. So Glory is transgender, Besides for her actual personality, Glory is like definition of a tomboy. She hates anything that's girly. She hates pink. She hates anything like that. She's really into like sports. She loves getting dirty. She's a tomboy. Her hair is short. She likes wearing like guy clothing. She's a tomboy. So her and Aisha get along very well. They're both they're not considered the conventions of what a girl's supposed to be. Aisha's she wears all black and is all moody. Glory is also kind of overactive, but she's very rough. She likes to roundhouse. She's very tomboy. So they get along well. So that's their whole thing. Glory is very tough. She's the daughter of War. She doesn't really have the powers, no one does, but War doesn't really have powers, and he's just tough, and she kind of inherits that. So that's the whole thing. Like, their whole thing is they are, teenage girls with superpowers for the most part who go on dangerous missions on behalf of Javier. One thing I want to establish is that characters like Victor also don't like them, mostly because Javier treated these girls like his kids more than he actually did his actual children, Javi sees the girls like his daughters. He cares a lot about them. He's constantly like, checking in on them. He's most always, he like finances them. They have to get jobs, but they still live normal high school lives, like their story works, besides the fact that like they wear, like their student uniforms is the New Order's logo, the NO, and they like, everyone who they interact with wears the New Order because they live in a New Order, in a no zone. They live in a no zone, specifically meant to teach school children. Their story arcs are very detached from the rest, and they have their own thing. Their story arcs is they go on missions to fight things on behalf of Javier. Right? Like, Clementine doesn't like the dolls because she sees them as what they are, child soldiers, who personally don't even work for the New Order, they work for Javier. And so that's another big conflict. Clementine does not like the dolls, even though one of them is her own sister, Eloise. And Eloise constantly, like, defends Javier because she likes this. She says it's cool, They're powerful. She can't die. One of them literally is the conjurer of magic, the only person who can use magic. And they're all powerful. So the chance of them actually dying is powerful. Fate can literally see the future. If they were going on a mission that they knew they were going to die, Fate will already know that and they won't go. So there's a whole thing between them two also. Clementine doesn't like the fact that Javier has basically these girls who are like child soldiers. And these girls are super loyal to Javier. Like, when the storyline later on when Javier becomes a dictator and starts his personality, these girls serve as his muscle. Like they are loyal to Javi. They see him as his dad. They see Javi as their dad, and so they're super loyal to him. And they like for teenage girls, they have no problem killing people, and like yeah, they still have to do like a lot of points. It's supposed to like contrast the fact that they do these work for this terrible organization, they kill people, but yet they still have to like worry about, you know, oh, my math exam next week, like, oh, I like this cute boy, you know, like all this stuff. So it's very like total whiplash, which I purposely want to do because I just think it's funny. So we have a storyline about Gauze, one about this organization, constantly infighting all this, and with conflicts with other organizations, and these girls who go on, like their storylines are all more with like the supernatural aspects, you know. They fight with otherworldly beings and stuff that the New Order is supposed to do, but they're too busy bickering with themselves, so they end up doing it, you know. And but the second time jump that happens when they're older, they also age. Like they're already a thing by the time most of these kids grow up, and by the second time skip, or yeah, when they're all like fully adults, they were on a. I want to say the lore reason is that they go on a mission. For them, it was like 2 weeks, but when they come back, there was another like dimension or some shit. 20 years have passed, and they did not age, so they're like the same age now as them. So yeah, what I'm trying to say is that Glory actually ends up in a relationship with Victor. Like Glory and Victor start dating, which is kind of weird because Glory knew Victor since she was like a newborn when she was like a teen, but because she was stuck in some like other dimension and didn't age, and she came back, they were like the same age now, and Victor kind of had a crush on her. So weird, but no, whatever, you know. And also Glory transgender, but she has, you know, she, her pronouns, so that's how it works. And yeah, besides that, like by the second time skip, by the time we get to the Victor Renee part, most of them are retired, or, you know, the only one still involved is, you know, obviously Glory because she's dating Victor, and Louise because she's related, and Fate, Aisha, Rachel, and Eve. By the time of the second time skip, they're not really involved anymore. Most of them settled down, or maybe died, I don't know. But yeah. Besides that, so that's like the 3 story arcs, right? The first is the Divines. Children, constantly, well, not children, but you know, siblings who bicker with one another. They toss human lives like nothing. They have followers, and you know, all powerful beings who just destroy shit because it's by their nature. Second storyline, I was on New Order, specifically this like family tree, how they constantly fight one another, conflict with other organizations, or conflict with themselves. And then the third story arc is this group of girls, you know, the dolls. Again, not perfect name. I just call that the dolls. And they go on missions, you know, about like friendship, their school drama, stuff like that. So, yeah, this is the New Order. This is my story arc that I came up with. Okay. Obviously, I have more specific storylines in mind, but for the time being, this is it, you know. And yeah, that's about it, you know. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you thought it was interesting, because, you know, as you can see, this is probably my longest video, because I want to talk about this. This is something that I came up with, I put like my heart and soul into. I thought a lot about it. These characters, which, you know, again, long form. These are a lot of characters, which is why I want this to be like a long form content. It's hard to focus on all this big ass cast when it's only like 1 or 2 movies. Like this is something, like I need to have my own Walking Dead, my own 200 issues just to really flesh this all out, you know. So I have ideas, and like I said, maybe I'll do if you guys want, maybe I'll do more videos if you should write games like specific story arcs. Obviously, I have other ideas besides this world, other worlds I create. Because again, I have a lot. I've been working on these in years, so I've been thinking about some of my videos explaining those also. But for the time being, yeah, this is about it. I hope you guys enjoy. And if you guys want to check out the shirt I got, yeah, I'm like bring it down. Yeah, shirt show off. I gotta show off my shirt. Look at that. Isabella Merced. She listens to her music. She makes good music also, top of her movies. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you have a good rest of your day. And, you know, leave a comment and say that this was fucking horrible idea, Carlos. Why the fuck did you come up with this? Don't ever talk about no bullshit OCs again, okay? Because this is what it was. I was just explaining my OC lore. So, yeah. I'll see you guys on the next side. Bye!